The starship Wanderer glided through the darkness of space, its hull reflecting the light of distant stars. Inside the command deck, Captain Jake Morrison stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the planet Kepler 442 grow larger on the viewscreen. He had made this journey across the galaxy for one simple reason: peace. Earth needed allies, and the Valdrani Empire was the most powerful force in this sector of space. Jake was a tall man with dark hair that was starting to show gray at the temples. His face carried the lines of someone who had seen both victory and loss. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Earth Defense Fleet with quiet pride. Behind him, his crew worked at their stations, checking systems and preparing for landing. Lieutenant Amy Chen looked up from her console. She was a sharp-minded woman with quick wit and faster reflexes. Her role as tactical officer meant she thought 3 steps ahead of everyone else. "Captain, we're receiving landing coordinates from the Valdrani spaceport. They're ready for us." "Take us down, Amy," Jake said calmly. He felt the nervous energy in the room. Everyone knew how important this mission was. The Valdrani were not known for their patience with weakness. Commander Ryan Blake stepped up beside Jake. Ryan was his second in command, a solid man with broad shoulders and a cautious nature. "Do you really think they'll agree to a trade agreement? From what I've read, they don't respect anyone they consider soft." Jake nodded slowly. "That's why we need to show them we're not soft. We're just different. Strength comes in many forms." The Wanderer descended through the atmosphere, and soon the Valdrani capital city came into view. It was a stunning sight. Massive towers of silver and gold reached toward the sky. Great bridges connected buildings hundreds of feet above the ground. Everything about the city spoke of power and pride. The ship landed in a designated area near the royal palace. Jake gathered his team for the diplomatic meeting. Along with Amy and Ryan, he brought Danny Torres, the ship's engineer, and Lieutenant Chris Hayes, the security chief. Chris was a muscular man who never smiled much. He kept his hand near his weapon even though they were supposed to be at a peaceful meeting. "Remember," Jake told them as they prepared to disembark, "we're here as guests. Be respectful, but don't let them push us around." The Valdrani greeting party waited at the bottom of the landing ramp. They were impressive beings. Most stood over 6.5 feet tall, with muscular builds and skin that had a slight purple tint. Their eyes were larger than human eyes, with gold or silver irises that seemed to glow. They wore elaborate armor even in peacetime, decorated with symbols of their houses and achievements. At the front of the group stood Princess Lyra Valdros. She was breathtaking. Tall and graceful, she moved like a predator. Her armor was lighter than the others, made of silver metal that caught the light. Her long dark hair fell past her shoulders, and her golden eyes studied the humans with undisguised curiosity. On her face was an expression of amusement, as if she found something funny about the visitors from Earth. "Captain Morrison," she said, her voice smooth and confident, "welcome to Valdros Prime. I am Princess Lyra, daughter of Emperor Valdros the Mighty. I will be overseeing our negotiations." Jake stepped forward and bowed slightly, a gesture of respect without submission. "Princess Lyra, thank you for receiving us. We hope this meeting will be the beginning of a strong partnership between our peoples." Lyra smiled, but there was something sharp in it. Partnership. An interesting word. We shall see if humans are capable of true partnership with the Valdrani. The princess led them through the palace. Every hallway seemed designed to impress and intimidate. Weapons from ancient battles hung on the walls. Statues of great warriors lined the corridors. Everything spoke of conquest and glory in combat. That evening, a formal banquet was held in the Great Hall. The room was enormous, with a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Hundreds of Valdrani nobles attended, all watching the human visitors with interest. Jake and his team sat at a long table near the princess. The food was strange but edible. The Valdrani served great portions of meat and rich sauces. They drank a strong beverage that made Jake's eyes water. Around them, Valdrani warriors told stories of battles and victories. It became clear that fighting and strength were at the center of their culture. As the meal continued, Princess Lyra began making comments about humanity. They started subtle, but grew more pointed. "Tell me, Captain, is it true that humans avoid combat whenever possible? That you prefer to talk and negotiate rather than test your strength. Jake kept his voice even. We believe that intelligence and diplomacy can solve problems that fighting cannot. But make no mistake, we fight when we must. We simply don't think every problem requires violence. Lyra laughed, and several Valdrani nobles joined her. How very convenient. A philosophy that excuses weakness. Amy Chen, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Her voice was calm but firm. Princess, if I may. Humanity has survived disease, war, environmental collapse, and a dozen extinction-level threats. We did it not by being the strongest, but by being the smartest and most adaptable. We're still here because we refuse to give up, no matter what the universe throws at us. I wouldn't call that weakness. The hall grew quiet. Several Valdrani leaned forward, interested. No one had expected the small human woman to challenge their princess so directly. Lyra's eyes locked onto Amy, then shifted to Jake. Something changed in her expression. Interest, maybe even respect, flickered there for a moment. Then her smile returned, wider and more dangerous than before. Brave words, Lyra said. She stood up from her seat, and every eye in the hall turned to her. I wonder if humans can back up such confidence with action. Jake felt his stomach tighten. He recognized the look in her eyes. She was about to do something dramatic. I issue a challenge, Lyra announced, her voice carrying through the great hall. My personal champion, Kale the Unbroken, will face any human warrior in single combat according to our ancient traditions. If your champion wins, I will honor the old marriage rite. I will bind myself to the victor, joining our peoples through the strongest bond in Valdrani culture. Gasps echoed through the hall. Several Valdrani nobles stood up in shock. An elderly advisor rushed to Lyra's side, whispering urgently to her. She waved him away. Jake stood slowly. His mind raced through the implications. This was either an incredible opportunity or a terrible trap. Princess, such a challenge is generous, but what? Lyra interrupted. You just claimed humans are strong and adaptable. Prove it. Unless your tactical officer spoke beyond her authority. The trap had closed. To refuse now would confirm every negative thing the Valdrani believed about humanity. It would destroy the alliance before it began. But to accept meant risking someone's life in a fight they might not win. Jake looked at his team. Ryan's face showed concern. Chris looked ready to volunteer. Amy met his eyes steadily, knowing she had put them in this position but standing by her words. Jake turned back to Lyra. We accept your challenge, Princess. Name the terms, and we will meet them. Lyra's smile was triumphant. The combat will take place in 3 days, in the Grand Arena. Traditional Valdrani weapons. The fight continues until one warrior yields or cannot continue. These are our ways. Agreed, Jake said, though his heart pounded. As the banquet ended and the humans returned to their ship, Jake wondered what he had just set in motion. Behind them, Princess Lyra watched them go, her expression unreadable. Elder Thane approached her quietly. That was reckless, Princess, he said softly. The marriage rite is sacred. Lyra continued staring after the humans. Perhaps. Or perhaps fate guided my words. Did you see how the captain stood tall despite his fear? How that woman spoke truth without hesitation. These humans are different from what we expected. Different does not mean equal to a Valdrani warrior. No, Lyra agreed. But it might mean something more interesting than we imagined. She turned and walked away, leaving the old advisor shaking his head. In her mind, Lyra replayed every moment of the evening, focusing especially on the calm confidence in Captain Morrison's eyes. She had issued the challenge to prove Valdrani's superiority, but now she wondered what would happen if she was wrong. 3 days would tell the story. 3 days until a human faced Kale the Unbroken. 3 days until everything changed. The crew gathered in the conference room aboard the Wanderer. The mood was tense. Everyone understood what was at stake. On the large screen mounted to the wall, a holographic image showed Kale the Unbroken in combat. The Valdrani champion stood over 7 feet tall, with muscles that looked carved from stone. In the footage, he moved with terrifying speed and power, defeating opponent after opponent. "He's never lost," Danny Torres said quietly, studying the data on his tablet. 47 recorded battles, 47 victories. Some of his opponents never got back up. Ryan Blake leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "This is insane. We're talking about certain death. We need to find a diplomatic way out of this." "There is no way out," Amy said, guilt heavy in her voice. "I'm sorry, Captain. I spoke without thinking." Jake shook his head. "You spoke the truth. We can't control how they reacted to it." He looked around the table at his crew. "The question now is who fights." "I'll do it," Chris Hayes said immediately. "I'm security chief. Combat is my job." "No," Jake said firmly. "This challenge was issued to me, as captain. I won't ask someone else to risk their life for something I accepted." Ryan stood up. "Jake, you can't be serious. You're a good fighter, but you're not a combat specialist. Let Chris do what he's trained for." "The decision is made," Jake said with finality. "I fight in 3 days. What we need now is a strategy." For a moment, silence filled the room. Then Amy straightened in her chair. "I've been going through the Valdrani cultural database we received. There are rules for these traditional combats. Strict rules. We need to study them." "What kind of rules?" Jake asked. Amy pulled up documents on the main screen. "The combat must use traditional Valdrani weapons. No modern energy weapons or advanced tech. The fight is one-on-one, no interference. But here's the important part. The arena itself is considered part of the test. Fighters can use the environment. Also, Valdrani combat follows formal patterns. They have specific stances and traditional techniques passed down for generations." Danny leaned forward, interested. "So they're predictable?" "In a way," Amy said. "They value honor and tradition. That means Kale will likely fight according to established techniques. If we can study those patterns, we might find weaknesses." Jake stood and walked to the screen, studying the footage of Kale. "He's stronger and faster than me. That's clear. I can't beat him at his own game." "Then we change the game," Chris said. "Human military training is different from Valdrani tradition. We focus on adaptability, using whatever works. We don't follow formal patterns." "Exactly," Amy agreed. "Kale expects a certain type of fight. We give him something unexpected." The next 3 days were the most intense of Jake's life. He trained constantly with Chris, learning to handle the Valdrani weapons, a long blade called a Koroth and a shorter defensive weapon similar to a baton. They were heavier than human weapons, designed for the Valdrani's greater strength. In the ship's cargo bay, converted into a training area, Jake practiced for hours each day. Chris came at him again and again, teaching him to move efficiently, to conserve energy, to think rather than just react. "Kale will be faster," Chris said during one session. "So don't try to match his speed. Make him come to you. Use his momentum against him." Jake wiped sweat from his face. His body ached. Easier said than done. "You wanted to do this," Chris reminded him. "So we make sure you survive it." Amy spent her time analyzing every piece of footage they had on Kale. She noticed patterns in his fighting style. He favored high attacks. He always circled to his right. He became overconfident when opponents showed fear. She compiled all this information, creating a tactical profile. Danny worked on Jake's equipment. While they couldn't use advanced technology, he modified Jake's combat armor to be lighter and more flexible than standard issue. Every ounce mattered in a fight like this. Ryan handled communications with Earth. The news of the challenge had spread quickly. Some government officials wanted Jake to refuse and return home. Others saw the potential benefits of an alliance through marriage to a Valdrani princess. Everyone had an opinion. Ryan filtered it all, letting Jake focus on preparation. On the second evening, Jake found himself unable to sleep. He walked through the quiet ship until he reached the observation deck. Through the large windows, he could see the Valdrani city glowing in the darkness. It was beautiful and alien at the same time. "Can't sleep either," a voice said behind him. Jake turned, startled. Princess Lyra stood in the doorway. She wore simpler clothing than at the banquet, though still elegant. Her golden eyes reflected the starlight. "Princess," Jake said, confused. "How did you get aboard?" "I requested permission to discuss the challenge rules with you," Lyra said. "Your Commander Blake granted it. He's waiting outside, watching carefully." She smiled slightly. "He doesn't trust me. Can you blame him?" "No." Lyra walked to the window and stood beside Jake, looking out at her home world. "I came to ensure you understand the rules clearly. Some aspects of the challenge are sacred to my people. I want no confusion." For the next hour, they went over the details. The arena, the weapons, the conditions for victory. But as they talked, the conversation shifted to other topics. Lyra asked about Earth, about human culture. Jake found himself describing oceans and forests, cities and art. Things he hadn't thought about in years. "Your world sounds softer than mine," Lyra said. "We Valdrani build everything for strength and permanence. Beauty is secondary." "I've seen beauty in your city," Jake said. "Those towers, the bridges. They're impressive." Lyra looked at him curiously. "You're about to fight for your life, possibly to die, yet you compliment my home. Are all humans this strange? Maybe we just choose to see the good in things, even when we're scared." "You admit you're scared?" "Of course," Jake said. "Only a fool wouldn't be scared of facing Kale. But fear doesn't mean I won't fight." Lyra was quiet for a moment. "That is something I understand. The Valdrani respect courage, especially in the face of fear." She turned to face him fully. "I should tell you something, Captain. When I issued that challenge, it was arrogance. I wanted to prove my people's superiority. But I've been thinking about what your officer said. About how humans survive. It made me question things I've always believed." "That's all we can ask," Jake said. "That people question their assumptions." "Do you question yours?" Lyra asked. "Every day." She studied his face for a long moment. "I'm beginning to understand why your crew follows you. There's a strength in you that isn't about muscles or speed. Something deeper." Before Jake could respond, Ryan's voice came through the comm system. "Captain, the princess's escort is requesting she return to the palace." Lyra stepped back. "I should go. The fight is tomorrow. I'll see you in the arena, Captain Morrison." She paused at the doorway. "I hope you survive. I find myself wanting to continue our conversation." Then she was gone, leaving Jake alone with his thoughts. He realized that Lyra was more complex than he had first believed. There was intelligence behind those golden eyes, and perhaps even doubt about the path her people had always followed. The final day arrived too quickly. Jake woke early and ran through his preparations one last time. He ate a light breakfast, checked his equipment, and spent an hour in meditation, clearing his mind. Chris had taught him that mental preparation was as important as physical training. His crew gathered to see him off. Danny gave him a small device. "Emergency beacon," he explained. "If things go really bad, press it. We'll come get you, Alliance be damned." Jake smiled and pocketed it, though he knew he'd never use it. Running would doom any chance of peace between Earth and the Valdrani. Amy stepped forward and handed him a datapad. "Everything I learned about Kale. Read it one more time before the fight. Remember, he's predictable because of his training. You're not." Ryan gripped Jake's shoulder. "Come back alive, Jake. That's an order from your friend, not your first officer." "I'll do my best," Jake promised. Chris walked with him to the transport that would take him to the arena. "Remember everything we practiced. Don't try to be stronger. Be smarter. Make him work for every move. Tire him out. And most importantly, don't give up. Humans are stubborn. Use that." Jake boarded the transport alone. As it lifted off and headed toward the massive arena in the center of the Valdrani capital, he thought about everything that had led to this moment. The years of service, the losses he'd endured, the responsibility he carried for his crew and his species. He thought about Princess Lyra's words from the night before. About questioning assumptions. About different kinds of strength. The arena loomed ahead, a massive structure that could hold hundreds of thousands of spectators. Jake could already hear the roar of the crowd. They were here to see a human fail, to see their champion prove Valdrani's superiority. Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Let them think what they wanted. He would show them what humanity was made of. Win or lose, he would fight with everything he had. The transport landed. The door opened. The roar of the crowd washed over him like a physical force. It was time. Jake stepped out into the light, walking toward his destiny with steady steps. Behind him, aboard the Wanderer, his crew watched on screens, hearts pounding. Across human space, millions watched, hoping and praying. And in the royal box above the arena, Princess Lyra leaned forward, her hands gripping the rail, her golden eyes fixed on the human captain who had somehow become more important to her than she wanted to admit. The grand arena was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The floor was covered in dark sand that had absorbed the blood of countless warriors over the centuries. The walls rose high on all sides, filled with thousands of Valdrani spectators. Their voices created a sound like thunder. Above the arena, multiple screens showed close-up views of the fighting ground, ensuring no one would miss a moment of the combat. Jake walked to the center of the arena. He wore modified human combat armor, lighter than standard military gear. At his sides hung the two traditional Valdrani weapons he had trained with, the Koroth blade and the defensive baton. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. He had learned long ago that fear was natural. What mattered was what you did with it. Across the arena, another entrance opened. The crowd's roar grew deafening. Kale the Unbroken emerged into the light. The Valdrani champion was even more imposing in person than in the recordings. He stood at least 7.5 feet tall. His armor was scarred from countless battles, each mark a story of victory. His arms were thick with muscle, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. In his hands, the Valdrani weapons looked small. His face was fierce, with sharp features and eyes that glowed a deep amber color. Kale raised his blade to the crowd, and they chanted his name. The sound rolled over Jake like a wave. This was their hero, their unbeatable champion. To them, this fight was already over. In the royal box, Princess Lyra stood surrounded by her court. Elder Thane stood at her side, along with several military commanders and nobles. All eyes were on the arena floor, but Lyra found her attention fixed on the human captain. He looked so small compared to Kale. A part of her wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. A horn sounded, long and low. An official in ceremonial robes stepped into the center of the arena. His voice was amplified so everyone could hear. "We are gathered for a challenge of honor," he announced. "Captain Jake Morrison of Earth faces Kale the Unbroken, champion of Valdros. The combat will continue until one warrior yields or can no longer fight. There will be no interference. May the strong prevail." The official left the arena quickly. Jake and Kale faced each other across 50 feet of sand. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the horn sounded again, and the fight began. Kale moved first. He crossed the distance between them in seconds, his blade coming down in a powerful overhead strike. Jake barely dodged, rolling to the side. The blade hit the sand where he had stood, sending up a spray of dark particles. The crowd roared their approval. This was what they wanted to see, the champion's power on full display. Jake didn't wait for the next attack. He moved in quickly, trying to get inside Kale's reach where the longer blade would be less effective. He struck with his baton at Kale's midsection. The champion blocked easily and backhanded Jake with his free hand. The impact sent Jake flying. He hit the arena floor hard, tasting blood. The crowd laughed and jeered. Jake forced himself to his feet. His jaw throbbed, but nothing felt broken. Kale advanced slowly now, confident. He said something in the Valdrani language. Jake didn't need a translation to understand. This will be quick. But Jake had not trained for 3 days just to give up at the first hit. He remembered Amy's analysis. Kale favored high attacks. He circled to his right. He became overconfident when opponents showed fear. So Jake charged directly at Kale, showing no fear at all. The move surprised the champion. For just a moment, his defensive stance shifted. Jake used that moment to strike at Kale's leg, Not with power but with precision. The baton connected with the side of the knee, a joint even Valdrani biology couldn't fully armor. Kale grunted and his stance faltered slightly. It was the first time in the fight that he had reacted to being hit. The crowd's noise changed, became uncertain. Jake didn't press the advantage. Instead, he backed away, making Kale chase him. This was Chris's strategy: make the stronger opponent work. Tire him out. Don't let him set the pace. For the next several minutes, the fight became a deadly dance. Kale attacked with tremendous power and speed. Jake dodged, blocked, retreated. He took hits. Several times he was knocked down. But each time, he got back up. And whenever he saw an opening, he struck at Kale's joints, his legs, spots where even the champion's superior strength couldn't help him. The arena sand was stained with blood from both fighters. Jake's armor was dented and torn. He was pretty sure he had cracked ribs. His left arm wasn't moving quite right. But Kale was breathing harder now. The champion's movements were still powerful but slightly slower than at the start. In the royal box, Elder Thane leaned toward Lyra. The human fights well for one so small. But he cannot win. Kale will finish this soon. Lyra didn't respond. She was watching Jake with intense focus. She saw something the elder didn't. The human was thinking constantly, adjusting his strategy, learning from each exchange. Kale was fighting the way he always fought, relying on strength and training. But Jake was adapting. Kale seemed to realize this too. He changed his approach, becoming more aggressive. He drove Jake back toward the arena wall with a series of powerful strikes. The blade came so close to Jake's face that he felt the wind of its passing. With his back nearly to the wall, Jake had nowhere left to retreat. Kale raised his blade high for a finishing strike. The crowd rose to their feet, anticipating victory. But Jake remembered the footage Amy had shown him. In that moment when Kale raised his blade high, there was an opening. A split second where the champion's center was exposed. Jake didn't think. He just moved. He dropped low and drove his shoulder into Kale's midsection with all the force he could manage. It was a rugby tackle, a move that no Valdrani had probably ever used in their formal combat traditions. Kale was driven backward, off balance. Jake stayed low and swept his leg at Kale's ankles. It was a basic judo technique, taught to human fighters for centuries. Use the opponent's momentum against them. Kale's feet left the ground. For the first time in his 47 victories, the champion fell. The arena went silent. Absolutely silent. No one could believe what they had just seen. Jake didn't waste the moment. While Kale was down, Jake struck hard at the champion's blade arm, hitting the pressure point at the elbow. The blade fell from Kale's grip. Jake kicked it away and pressed his own blade to Kale's throat. Both fighters were breathing hard, covered in blood and sweat. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Jake could finish this. The champion was at his mercy. But Jake didn't press the blade down. "Yield," he said quietly, in English. Then he repeated it in the Valdrani language he had learned, "Surrender." Kale's eyes widened. In Valdrani culture, showing mercy to a defeated opponent was a sign of great honor. It said you were strong enough to choose not to kill. Kale reached up slowly and touched Jake's blade, pushing it aside with his own hand. The gesture was a formal yield, one that every Valdrani in the arena recognized. "I yield," Kale said clearly. "The human has won." For a heartbeat, the arena remained silent. Then, slowly, a sound began to build. It started with a few Valdrani standing and clapping. Then more joined. Within moments, the entire arena was on their feet, not jeering but applauding. They had come to see their champion destroy a weak human. Instead, they had witnessed something they valued even more: true courage and skill in the face of overwhelming odds. The human had earned their respect. Jake stepped back and offered his hand to Kale. The champion stared at it for a moment, then took it. Jake pulled him to his feet. They stood together in the center of the arena, both warriors who had fought with honor. Kale spoke, loud enough for all to hear. "This human fights with the heart of a Valdrani warrior. I was wrong to underestimate him. He has earned his victory." The crowd's approval grew even louder. They began chanting Jake's name alongside Cale's. It was unprecedented. A human, who they had viewed as weak, had defeated their greatest champion and shown mercy in doing so. In the royal box, Princess Lyra stood frozen. Her hands gripped the railing so hard they hurt. She realized she was shaking. The fear she had felt watching Jake take hit after hit, the relief when he got back up each time, the shock of his victory, all of it crashed over her at once. Elder Thane looked at her with knowing eyes. "The marriage rite must be honored, Princess. You are bound by your oath." Lyra nodded slowly. She couldn't take her eyes off Jake Morrison. He had done what should have been impossible. And in doing so, he had changed everything. Officials rushed into the arena to attend to both fighters. Medical teams checked their injuries. Jake's crew would want to beam him directly to the ship's medical bay, but tradition required he remain for the victory ceremony. As medics worked on his various injuries, Jake looked up at the royal box. Princess Lyra stood there, her golden eyes locked on his. Even from this distance, he could see the complex emotions on her face. Fear, respect, and something else he couldn't quite identify. Jake had come to this planet hoping to secure a trade agreement. Now he had won something far more significant and far more complicated. He had won the hand of an alien princess through a sacred rite that could change the relationship between their peoples forever. The question was, what would happen next? The crowd continued to celebrate, but in the royal box, Lyra turned to her advisors. "Prepare for the ceremony," she said quietly. 3 days from now, as tradition requires." "Princess, are you certain?" Elder Thane asked. "You could find a way to—" "I gave my oath," Lyra interrupted. "Before my people and before the gods of our ancestors. I will honor it." She looked back at the arena, where Jake was being helped to his feet. "Besides, perhaps this was meant to be. Perhaps fate has plans we cannot see." As the sun began to set over the Valdrani capital, casting long shadows across the arena, Jake Morrison realized that winning the fight was just the beginning. The real challenge, whatever it might be, was yet to come. In 3 days, he would marry an alien princess. In 3 days, 2 species would be bound together in a way neither had imagined. In 3 days, everything would change. But for now, Jake allowed himself a moment of relief. He had survived. Against all odds, he had won. And somewhere deep inside, beneath the pain and exhaustion, he felt something unexpected. He felt hope. The medical bay aboard the Wanderer was quiet except for the soft beeping of monitoring equipment. Jake lay on the examination table while Danny ran a scanner over his injuries. 3 cracked ribs, a dislocated shoulder that had been put back in place, various cuts and bruises, and a mild concussion. Nothing permanent, but enough to make every movement hurt. "You look like you got hit by a transport," Danny said, shaking his head. "I still can't believe you won." "Neither can I," Jake admitted. His voice was hoarse. Every word made his ribs ache. The door opened and Ryan entered, followed by Amy and Chris. Relief showed clearly on all their faces. Amy's eyes were red, as if she had been crying. "The Valdrani have confirmed the ceremony will take place in 3 days," Ryan said, pulling up a chair beside the medical table. "It's being broadcast across both our space and theirs. Earth's government is in chaos. Half of them think you're a hero, the other half think you've trapped yourself in an impossible situation." Jake managed a weak smile. "What do you think?" Ryan was quiet for a moment. "I think you did what you had to do. What happens next is the real question." "I need to talk to her," Jake said, trying to sit up. Pain shot through his torso and he gasped. "Easy," Danny said, gently pushing him back down. "You're not going anywhere for at least 12 hours. You need rest." "I can't rest," Jake insisted. "In 3 days I'm supposed to marry Princess Lyra. We need to discuss what that means. For us, for our peoples. She might not even want this. I forced her into it by winning." "Actually," Amy said softly, "she requested permission to visit you. She's waiting outside right now. We told her you needed medical treatment first, but she insisted on staying." Jake looked at his crew. "Let her in. And give us privacy." Ryan looked uncertain. "Jake, are you sure? You're in no condition to." "I'm sure," Jake said firmly. "This is bigger than me being tired or hurt. This affects everyone." His crew filed out reluctantly. A moment later, the door opened again. Princess Lyra stepped inside. She had changed from her ceremonial armor into simpler robes of deep blue. Her hair was down, falling in waves past her shoulders. She looked different somehow, less like a princess and more like a woman carrying a heavy burden. She stopped when she saw Jake on the medical table, his torso wrapped in bandages. "Your injuries," she said quietly. "They are serious." "I'll heal," Jake said. "Your champion fights well." "He does." Lyra moved closer, her movements careful, as if approaching something fragile. "He also told me something interesting after the fight. He said you could have killed him but chose not to." "Why?" "Because killing him wasn't the point," Jake said. "The challenge was to defeat him, not execute him." "There's a difference." Lyra pulled up a chair and sat down beside the table. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Her golden eyes were searching, trying to understand. "My people would not have shown such mercy. We believe that defeating an enemy completely means removing them as a future threat." "That's one way to think about it," Jake agreed. "But humans have learned that making allies is more valuable than making corpses. Kale is a good warrior. Why would I want him dead when he could be a friend instead?" "You are strange creatures," Lyra said, but there was no mockery in her voice. "I came here to discuss the ceremony, and to offer you a way to escape the marriage rite if you wish." Jake raised an eyebrow, which hurt. "Escape? I thought it was sacred." "It is," Lyra said. "But I have been thinking. I issued the challenge out of arrogance and pride. You fought because refusing would have destroyed the alliance. Neither of us entered this freely. So perhaps we can find a way to honor the rite symbolically while not binding ourselves permanently." "You mean a marriage in name only?" Jake asked. "One we could quietly dissolve later." "Yes." Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Can I ask you something, Princess? Do you want to escape this marriage?" The question clearly surprised her. "Does it matter what I want?" "It matters to me," Jake said. "I won't enter a marriage with someone who feels trapped, even if it would help the alliance. That's not the kind of person I am." Lyra stood and walked to the small window, looking out at the stars. "I have been raised my entire life to put duty before personal desires. What I want has never been relevant to the decisions I make. I am a princess. My life belongs to my people." "I understand duty," Jake said. "I've spent my career in service to Earth. I've made sacrifices. But that doesn't mean we have to sacrifice everything. What we want matters, Lyra. We're people, not just symbols." She turned to face him. "You use my name. Would you prefer I didn't?" "No," she said softly. "I prefer it. It's just that very few people speak to me as a person rather than as a title." She came back to the chair and sat down again. "Captain Morrison, Jake, I don't know what I want. That's the truth. 3 days ago, I thought I knew exactly who I was and what I believed. But you've challenged all of that." "How?" Jake asked. "By being unexpected," Lyra said. "By showing strength without cruelty. By offering mercy when you could have claimed total victory. By speaking to me as an equal rather than as something to be conquered or feared." She leaned forward. "I have been wondering, what would it be like to make a choice just for myself? Not for duty, not for my people, but because I wanted something." Jake listened carefully. He could hear the conflict in her voice, see it in the way she held herself. Princess Lyra was at a crossroads, caught between the life she had always known and the possibility of something different. "I can't tell you what to choose," Jake said. "But I can tell you what I think. I think duty is important. Responsibility matters. But so does happiness. So does freedom. If we're going to do this marriage, I want it to be a real choice, not just obligation." "And if I choose to go through with it?" Lyra asked. "Truly, not as a diplomatic arrangement but as a genuine partnership?" "Then we figure it out together," Jake said. "We learn about each other. We build something new, Something that honors both our peoples without forcing either of us to give up who we are." Lyra was quiet for a long time. Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance across the darkness. Inside the small medical bay, two people from different worlds tried to understand each other. Finally, Lyra spoke. "I would like to spend the next 3 days talking with you. Not about politics or duty, but about life. About what we believe, what we hope for, what frightens us. I want to know who Jake Morrison is when he's not being a captain or a diplomat." "I'd like that," Jake said. "And I want to know who Lyra is when she's not being a princess." She smiled, and it transformed her face. The fierce warrior princess disappeared, replaced by someone younger, more uncertain, but also more real. "Then we have an agreement. 3 days of honesty. Then we decide together what the ceremony will mean." Over the next 3 days, while Jake healed and the Valdrani prepared for the ceremony, something unexpected happened. Jake and Lyra talked. They met in neutral spaces, sometimes on the Wanderer, sometimes in private rooms in the palace. They spoke about their lives, their losses, their dreams. Lyra told Jake about growing up in the royal court, about the pressure to be perfect, to never show weakness. She spoke about her mother, who had died when Lyra was young, and how she had tried to fill that empty space with duty and honor. Jake told her about Earth, about losing his family in a colony raid when he was 20, about joining the fleet because he couldn't save them but maybe he could save others. He spoke about the weight of command, about making decisions that cost lives, about the loneliness of leadership. They discovered surprising similarities. Both were warriors who questioned warfare. Both were leaders who sometimes doubted their own choices. Both carried responsibilities that left little room for personal happiness. But they also found differences that complemented each other. Lyra's directness balanced Jake's diplomacy. Jake's flexibility softened Lyra's rigid adherence to tradition. She taught him about Valdrani honor and the beauty in their warrior culture. He showed her the value in adaptation and compromise. Ryan watched his captain during this time and saw a change. The weariness that Jake usually carried seemed lighter. He smiled more. He seemed, for the first time in years, hopeful about something beyond just survival. Amy noticed how Princess Lyra's guards, who had been suspicious of humans, slowly began to relax. They saw their princess happy, engaged in a way she never was during formal court functions. She laughed at Jake's stories. She challenged his ideas without anger. She seemed more alive. On the second evening, Lyra brought Jake to a quiet garden in the palace. It was night, and the alien stars shone overhead. They walked among strange plants that glowed softly in the darkness. "This was my mother's favorite place," Lyra said. "She would bring me here when I was young and tell me stories about the ancient Valdrani, about the time before we became conquerors, when we were explorers and builders." "What happened?" Jake asked. "Why did that change?" "Fear," Lyra said simply. "We encountered other species who wanted to destroy us. We survived by becoming stronger, more aggressive. Eventually, strength became our identity. We forgot how to be anything else." "It's not too late to remember," Jake said. Lyra stopped walking and turned to face him. "Is that what you hope this marriage will do? Change my people?" "No," Jake said honestly. "I hope it will show both our peoples that we don't have to stay the same forever. That we can learn from each other and become something better together." "That's a beautiful dream," Lyra said. "But dreams are fragile things." "Then we'll protect it," Jake said. "Together." Lyra reached out and took his hand. It was the first time they had touched since the fight in the arena. Her hand was larger than his, her skin slightly warmer. "Jake Morrison, I have made a decision. I want this marriage to be real. Not a political arrangement, not a temporary alliance, but a genuine partnership. I want to try building this dream with you." Jake felt his heart race. "Are you sure? This will change everything for both of us." "I'm terrified," Lyra admitted. "But I'm also excited. For the first time in my life, I'm making a choice just for me. And I choose you." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "Then I choose you too. Let's see what we can build together." The night of the third day arrived. Tomorrow would be the ceremony. Jake returned to the Wanderer for one final meeting with his crew. They gathered in the conference room, all of them trying to process what was happening. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Ryan asked. "Once you go through with the ceremony, there's no easy way back." "I'm sure," Jake said. "This isn't what I expected when we came here. But sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't plan for." Chris nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, Captain, I think you're doing the right thing. I've watched you with her. You're different. Happier. And she's different too," Amy added. "My security contacts among the Valdrani say she's been challenging her advisors, questioning traditions, pushing for reforms. You've influenced her just as much as she's influenced you." Danny grinned. "So our captain is getting married to an alien princess. Never thought I'd see that when I signed up for the fleet." They all laughed, releasing some of the tension. But then Jake grew serious. "I need you all to understand something. This marriage will make me part of the Valdrani royal family. That might complicate my position as captain of the Wanderer. I don't know what Earth Command will decide." "Whatever happens," Ryan said firmly, "we're with you. You're our captain, and that won't change." The others nodded in agreement. They had been through too much together to let politics tear them apart now. That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He stood in the observation deck, looking out at the Valdrani city. Tomorrow his life would change forever. He would marry Princess Lyra and become a bridge between two civilizations. Part of him was terrified. Part of him was excited. But mostly, he felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. He felt ready for the future. The morning of the ceremony dawned bright and clear over Valdros Prime. In his quarters aboard the Wanderer, Jake stood in front of a mirror, adjusting the formal uniform his crew had prepared. It was a blend of human and Valdrani styles, the deep blue of Earth's fleet combined with silver accents and the flowing cape that Valdrani nobility wore. On his chest, he wore both the insignia of his rank and a new symbol, the joining crest that represented the union of two houses. Ryan entered without knocking, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Jake. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Jake admitted. "This is really happening." "It is," Ryan said. "The whole galaxy is watching. Earth news feeds are going crazy. The Valdrani have opened the ceremony to public viewing across their empire. Some estimates say over 1 billion people will be watching." Jake took a sip of coffee, trying not to think about the numbers. "No pressure then." Ryan smiled slightly. "For what it's worth, I think you're making the right choice. I've watched you and Lyra together these past few days. There's something real there." "I hope so," Jake said quietly. "Because if this doesn't work, it won't just be our hearts that break. It'll be the alliance between our peoples." "Then don't let it fail," Ryan said simply. "You've faced impossible odds before and won. You can do this too." An hour later, a formal Valdrani transport arrived to take Jake to the ceremony site. Not the palace, but an ancient temple on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Lyra had chosen it specifically, saying she wanted the ceremony to take place somewhere meaningful, not just impressive. The temple was beautiful. White stone pillars rose toward the sky, carved with symbols from thousands of years of Valdrani history. The ocean crashed against the rocks far below, its sound mixing with the wind. The sun was low on the horizon, painting everything in shades of gold and orange. Thousands of guests filled the temple grounds. Valdrani nobility in their finest armor stood alongside human diplomats in formal dress. Jake's crew had places of honor near the front. And everywhere, cameras captured every moment for the watching billions. Jake walked down the central path between the assembled guests. His heart pounded, but he kept his steps steady. Elder Thane waited at the altar, ready to perform the ceremony according to ancient tradition. Beside him stood Kale, who had asked to serve as witness, an honor that showed his respect for Jake. Then music began to play, a haunting melody from Valdrani instruments that sounded like nothing on Earth. The crowd turned as one. Princess Lyra appeared at the far end of the path. She was breathtaking. She wore a gown that combined Valdrani tradition with something new and unique. It was made of fabric that seemed to shimmer like starlight, flowing around her as she walked. Her dark hair was woven with silver threads and small crystals that caught the light. On her head sat a simple crown, elegant rather than ostentatious. But it was her face that captured Jake's attention. She was smiling, genuinely and openly, and her golden eyes were fixed on him with unmistakable warmth. She walked alone, which surprised some of the Valdrani. Tradition said her father should escort her. But Emperor Valdros was away on military matters, and Lyra had chosen to walk independently. It was a statement. She was making this choice for herself. When she reached Jake, she took his hands. They were warm and steady. Together, they turned to face Elder Thane. The old advisor began the ceremony. He spoke in the ancient Valdrani language first, then translated to standard human speech. We are gathered in the sight of both our peoples to witness a union unprecedented in the history of either species. Princess Lyra Valdros, heir to the Valdrani Empire, and Captain Jake Morrison of Earth, have chosen to bind themselves together through the sacred marriage rite. He paused and looked at both of them seriously. This is not a union born of political convenience or simple tradition. It is a choice made by two warriors who have tested each other and found strength in partnership. Before we proceed, I must ask, do you enter this union freely, understanding the weight of what you undertake? I do, Lyra said clearly, her voice carrying across the temple grounds. I do, Jake echoed. Elder Thane nodded. Then we shall proceed. But first, the couple has requested to speak. This was not traditional. Murmurs ran through the crowd. But Lyra stepped forward, still holding Jake's hand. We stand here today at a crossroads, she began, addressing both the assembled guests and the cameras broadcasting across the galaxy. For generations, the Valdrani have believed that strength comes from conquest and dominance. We have built an empire on the principle that power is all that matters. She paused, letting her words sink in. But I have learned something from the humans. I have learned that true strength also requires wisdom, compassion, and the courage to change. When Captain Morrison defeated Kale the Unbroken, he could have taken a life. Instead, he offered mercy. That moment taught me more about strength than all my years of warrior training. Lyra turned to look at Jake. This marriage is not about one species conquering another. It is about two peoples learning from each other. I pledge to honor both my Valdrani heritage and the human values that Jake Morrison represents. I pledge to be a bridge between our worlds, not a symbol of dominance. She stepped back, and now Jake spoke. I came to Valdros Prime expecting to negotiate a simple trade agreement. Instead, I found something far more valuable: understanding. Princess Lyra has shown me the beauty in Valdrani culture, the honor in their traditions, the depth of their loyalty. He looked out at the crowd, meeting both human and Valdrani eyes. This marriage is about building something new. Not humans becoming Valdrani, or Valdrani becoming human, but both of us creating a future where we are stronger together. It won't be easy. There will be challenges, misunderstandings, conflicts. But if we face them with respect and the willingness to learn, we can build something that benefits all our peoples. Jake turned back to Lyra. I pledge to honor your culture while staying true to my own. To listen when we disagree. To stand beside you as an equal partner. And to work every day to make this union something that brings our peoples together rather than divides them. The crowd was silent. Then, slowly, applause began. It started with Jake's crew, then spread to some of the Valdrani warriors who had watched the arena fight. Soon, nearly everyone was applauding, even those who had opposed the marriage. Elder Thane waited for the applause to fade, then continued the ceremony. He spoke the ancient words that bound two lives together in Valdrani tradition. Then, at Jake's request, he added a human element, vows spoken directly to each other. Jake Morrison, Lyra said, her voice steady but emotional, I choose you as my partner, my equal, my husband. I promise to challenge you, support you, and stand beside you. In joy and in hardship, in peace and in conflict, I am yours as you are mine. Lyra Valdros, Jake replied, I choose you as my partner, my equal, my wife. I promise to respect your strength, share your burdens, and celebrate your victories. In all things, we face the future together. Elder Thane raised his hands. Then by the ancient laws of the Valdrani and the witnessed promises of both individuals, I declare this union sealed. You are bound as one. Lyra and Jake kissed, and the crowd erupted in celebration. Horns sounded. Music played. The joining of human and Valdrani, of Earth and the Empire, was complete. The celebration that followed lasted into the night. Humans and Valdrani mingled, sharing food and drink from both cultures. Barriers that had seemed impossible to cross began to dissolve. Warriors who had viewed humans as weak now shared stories with Earthfleet officers. Human diplomats who had feared the Valdrani found themselves laughing with alien nobles. Jake and Lyra moved through the celebration together, greeting guests from both sides. They were partners in this, just as they had promised. When Valdrani traditionalists expressed concern about the changes the marriage might bring, Lyra addressed them with diplomatic skill. When human officials worried about losing influence, Jake reassured them that Earth's interests were protected. Late in the evening, they finally found a moment alone. They stood on a balcony overlooking the ocean, the sound of the celebration fading behind them. "We did it," Lyra said, leaning against the railing. "We actually did it." "The ceremony is done," Jake agreed. "But the real work starts now." "I know," Lyra said. She turned to face him. "Jake, I want you to understand something. I meant every word I said in my vows. This is not a political arrangement to me anymore. It's real." "It's real to me too," Jake said. He took her hand. "We're going to face challenges. There will be people on both sides who oppose us. There will be moments when we disagree." "I'm counting on it," Lyra said with a slight smile. "If we agreed on everything, one of us wouldn't be necessary. Our differences make us stronger." Jake laughed. "I never thought I'd hear a Valdrani princess say that." "I never thought I'd become one who believes it," Lyra admitted. "You've changed me, Jake Morrison. I hope I've changed you too." "You have," Jake said. "You've shown me that strength and compassion aren't opposites. That honor and flexibility can coexist. That duty and happiness don't have to be enemies." They stood together in comfortable silence, looking out at the alien ocean under alien stars. Two people from different worlds, bound together by choice and courage. The following days brought a flurry of activity. Jake and Lyra began the complex process of building their shared life. They would split time between Earth and Valdros Prime, representing both peoples. They would work on the new treaty that their marriage had made possible, ensuring fair trade and mutual defense. But more importantly, they began learning what it meant to be partners. Lyra studied human history and culture with genuine interest. She was fascinated by Earth's diversity, by how humans had learned to unify despite their differences. Jake studied Valdrani military strategy and philosophy, finding unexpected wisdom in their warrior traditions. The crew of the Wanderer remained with Jake, but their mission changed. Instead of simple diplomatic runs, they became ambassadors of the new alliance. Ryan, Amy, Danny, and Chris all played roles in bridging the gap between species. Amy became a liaison between human and Valdrani military forces, teaching each side about the other's tactics. Danny worked with Valdrani engineers, sharing technology that benefited both peoples. Chris trained with Valdrani warriors, creating a mixed combat style that combined human adaptability with Valdrani strength. Ryan helped navigate the complex politics that arose as two civilizations learned to work together. Kale the Unbroken, the warrior Jake had defeated, became an unexpected ally. He publicly declared his respect for humans and worked to change the attitudes of other Valdrani warriors. His influence was significant. If their greatest champion could respect humans, others followed his example. 3 months after the wedding, Jake and Lyra stood together in the chambers of the Valdrani High Council. They had spent weeks negotiating, planning, and convincing reluctant leaders. Now they were ready to present their proposal, a true alliance between Earth and the Valdrani Empire, with shared resources, mutual defense, and cultural exchange. "This alliance will change both our peoples," Jake told the assembled council. "But change is not something to fear. It's something to embrace. Together, we can achieve what neither of us could alone." "We offer not dominance but partnership," Lyra added. "Not conquest but cooperation. The human way and the Valdrani way are different, but both have value. By combining them, we create something new and stronger." The vote was not unanimous. Some council members still clung to old ways. But enough had seen the potential in the alliance. The treaty passed. News of the official alliance spread across both human space and the Valdrani Empire. The reaction was mixed but largely positive. People from both sides began to see the possibilities. Trade routes opened. Cultural exchanges began. Human ships visited Valdrani worlds, and Valdrani ships traveled to Earth. It was not perfect. There were incidents, misunderstandings, conflicts. Some humans feared Valdrani aggression. Some Valdrani looked down on human weakness. But each time problems arose, Jake and Lyra worked to resolve them. They were living proof that differences could be bridged. One evening, 6 months after their wedding, Jake and Lyra sat together in their shared quarters aboard the Wanderer. They had just returned from a diplomatic mission to a neutral world where they had successfully negotiated the release of human prisoners held by a hostile species. The Valdrani military might and human diplomatic skill had worked together perfectly. "I've been thinking," Lyra said, curled up beside Jake. "When I first issued that challenge in the banquet hall, I never imagined it would lead to this. To us, to the Alliance, to everything we're building." "Regrets?" Jake asked. "None," Lyra said firmly. "That moment of arrogance became the best decision of my life. Even if I didn't know it at the time." Jake smiled and kissed her forehead. "I came here expecting to fight for survival. Instead, I found a partner who makes me stronger every day." "We make each other stronger," Lyra corrected. "That's what partnership means." Through the window, they could see Earth in the distance, blue and beautiful. And somewhere beyond it, Valdros Prime orbited its star, proud and golden. Two worlds, once strangers, now bound together by the courage of two people who had dared to choose connection over tradition. The story of the alien princess who dared a human to defeat her champion had become legend. But the real story was just beginning. It was the story of two civilizations learning to understand each other.